realizando OCERCO en el marco de su 25 aniversario en el país. Hoy con la presencia de Mario Herrera de la editorial Pearson, a quien con muchísimo honor recibimos virtualmente desde Venezuela. Le voy a pedir a Arturo Piñango, gerente de comercialización de OCERCO, para que nos hable un poco de la empresa y cuáles son las novedades que este año estamos ofertando a nuestros clientes, y para que Arturo también presente a Mario, con quien se lo une una buena amistad. Así es que muchísimas gracias a todos por estar en la tarde de hoy. Bienvenidos y manténganse atentos a nuestras redes sociales, donde estaremos informando de las futuras actividades que van a ser de mucho interés. Bienvenidos todos. Adelante, Arturo. Arturo, ¿será que tienes problemas de conexión? Bueno, ¿me escuchan? ¿O soy yo sola la que estoy con problemas de conexión?
Yo sí te escucho.
Perfecto, Mario, gracias. Bueno, creo que Arturo tiene problemas de conexión, entonces le voy a pedir a Melvis para que presente a Mario. Ya está Arturo. Bienvenido, Arturo. Adelante.
Sí, buenas tardes. Como estaba diciendo, pues, en el marco de los 25 años de OCERCO, estamos celebrando una serie de ponencias de aquí al mes de noviembre, diciembre, para dar apoyo a la educación en Venezuela y también darle todo lo que aportar al país, cosas nuevas, ideas nuevas, nuevas vivencias de otras partes, como en este caso de Mario Herrera, que nos está hablando desde México y de su experiencia a nivel mundial. OCERCO tiene ya, como dije, 25 años en el país y estamos innovando. Ya tuvimos nuestra feria del libro virtual hace unos meses, que fue todo un éxito, y seguimos haciendo este tipo de eventos para beneficio de todos los profesores y de todas aquellas personas que quieran unirse a nuestros eventos. En el caso de Mario Herrera, bueno, una amistad hace muchísimos años, cuando trabajamos juntos en Pearson. Ponente, autor, excelente autor de libros para preescolar y primaria, bachillerato, conocido mundialmente, excelente persona, mejor amigo, y accedió gentilmente a prestarnos un poquito de su tiempo para estar con nosotros y hacer su ponencia. Bienvenido, Mario.
Gracias. Thank you. And should I begin now, or is somebody else going to speak?
It's all yours, Mario.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Greetings and welcome to my home in Houston, Texas. Today, we are going to talk about something that is on everybody's mind, and that is the fact that because of the pandemic that we are living, we have had to come up with strategies to teach online most of the time, if not always. One of the things that I have worked on, because for those of you that might remember me from my past visits to your beautiful country, I always do experimentation with students. And of course, because of the issue that I just mentioned, my experimentation last year and at the beginning of this year had to be online as well, which helped me prepare certain topics regarding how to make the best of it. One of the key things that are different between teaching in classrooms versus teaching online is the fact that we know that involving students is very important, but involving them when we teach online is a big challenge. And that's why I prepared, within a few of the sessions that I've prepared for that matter, I prepared one on online teaching when it comes to how can we involve our students and how important it is. Now, I would like to start with a little quote from John Dewey, which was one of my heroes. I am a confessed cognitivist, and my books and all my experimentation are based on the fact that learning is centered in the student, and this student is the thinker that we must adapt and connect to the content through a thinking process that makes them get more involved. And today's key word is the word involved. One of the things Dewey left us is the fact that if we give students something to do, not something to learn, and notice the implication of that phrase, see? In other words, when we teach, we should have our students doing, not just facing content. If we give our students something to do, not something to learn, obviously, what's going to happen is that they are going to be exposed to scenario situations that demand thinking. And when we demand thinking, then that thinking is the one that develops certain connections with other things, with other brain functions, and with other surrounding things. That is what allows learning to happen in a better way. So let's keep our students busy, in other words. When we talk about teaching using correct strategies, obviously, one of the things we want to do is to actively engage our students in as many ways as possible. And I am a firm believer that if we keep our students thinking, speaking, and doing, then things will be better for us. And of course, they will be better for us because they are better for the learner. So a way of keeping them in that triangle of think, speak, and do, a lot of it is based on keeping them busy with their hands, interacting amongst each other, which of course, by nature, that's the way human beings are. And if we take a point as they face the content we are teaching them, to be able to critique it, to construct new concepts, to produce knowledge, in other words, then this is going to be not just involvement, but meaningful involvement. The difference between just involvement and meaningful involvement is crucial when we consider involvement as part of learning. I can have a party with children and have them all involved in games, but that doesn't mean there is learning. In order for involvement to be part of learning, or a facilitator or an accelerator of learning, it has to be meaningful involvement. It has to come from connections, as Dewey was talking or mentioned in his life, connections that the student can make between his knowledge, his experiences, his interests, his wishes, his desires, his opinions, and the activity, the content that we are having him or her face. Now, in the classroom, because that's what we have normally, students will teach each other, see? They will develop new knowledge, and of course, the teacher and students are going to be co-learners, because the same way that they learn from us, we are going to learn from them. Not because we know less than them, but because anything that a student has to contribute is new to us for that moment. Obviously, if we are following the right teaching principles, then this is going to happen. And the right teaching principles today are based on the concepts of something called assessment for learning. Now, not to be confused with assessment of learning. For many, many years now, ending our past century, and for the 21 years that we've lived of this century, I've been around a while. We were already talking at the end of the last century, beginning of this century, we were talking about assessment of learning. But this is a different thing. This is assessment for learning. It's not a thing, it's a how, it's a method. So if we do it right, and I will take a few minutes to explain a connection of it with what I'm talking about today, then there's going to be a continuous analysis. And there's going to be a continuing synthesis of what the students are doing that will allow them to produce new concepts. Remember, we don't just want to entertain students. We don't just want to expose them so that they can sort of remember things. We want them to live the concepts so they can incorporate it. It can become part of their life skills, whatever it is that we are teaching them. Having said that, then the big question we have to address today is, can that happen when we are teaching online? And it is difficult. How can we keep this interaction going when all I have is a little window? I'm not there, I'm not mingling, I'm not addressing students individually on the spot. I'm looking at a bunch of faces on a screen. So that is the challenge that we need to solve. How can we keep them involved? How can we make them interactive? They're not even sitting in the same room. How can they become good critics? How can they construct and produce meaningfully in a proactive way, in a way that they generate concepts? Well, that's what this session is about. So let's get a move on it. Now, the first challenge we have to face, think of it as an obstacle race, okay? The first challenge, the first obstacle is the fact that our students are not all alike. We have just by nature, we have dependent learners and independent learners. And the problem that we face is that the way we are supposed to be teaching today online cannot support teaching dependent students. But that's the way some of them are. So what we need to do is find a way of promoting independent learning as we go along. And that represents, of course, an extra challenge for a teacher. The teachers must design activities keeping the learners working on their own. And so then it's not just the moment we have them on screen, but the way we address the activities they are to get involved with, where they could be on their own, but generating concepts, developing things, getting involved, getting more familiar with the language that they are studying. And that way, as we train them, and we're going to talk about some strategies today, as we train them, what we are basically achieving or pursuing is to develop independence in those learners that in other circumstances would totally be dependent on the teacher's settings of what's supposed to happen in the classroom. Of course, there is a caveat. See, teachers need to know how to design these activities. That's why Oserco and other people are having seminars, because it's not just attending a session with unsupervised activities, but the caveat has to do that these activities have to be challenging, but not excessively challenging. And they have to be challenging, but we still need to assess them. The other assessment of learning, okay? The first one that we knew 20 years ago. So in other words, don't set your students out to do things that you cannot observe or measure. But even if they work on their own, that doesn't mean you cannot observe it, but you can do it through registration processes. Students can send you things, okay? I have another session on these things regarding how students can connect with the teacher and send their stuff so the teacher can have an eye on everything that's going on, even though a lot of it is happening offline. Now, let's talk about keeping independent learners involved. Well, the first thing is we must remember to teach in shorter sequences. The way we teach when we are with our students in classrooms, well, the way that you wait for certain minutes and then you have a little wrap up, when you teach online, you have to do it more often. Students, because they are under the age of 18, the mental stages of a human being evolve from the moment they are born to when they are in their 18s or their late teens and 20s. Therefore, depending on the age of your students, that's the amount of time, that's the amount of mental time span that your students can have to keep it together, to follow the train of thought that you are trying to develop with them as you present a context or whatever it is that you're teaching them. Now, regularly, you want to check comprehension very often, very often. And what you're going to do is ask them quick questions to test whether they understood. And of course, that is the key point in each of these short segments. Now, remember, I have always said this, and I started teaching many, many moons ago, never move on if you are not sure that what your students have been exposed to hasn't been understood. The first rule of language teaching is make sure there is comprehension in order to move on. Otherwise, you're going to be building a sandcastle that will collapse at any moment. and then it's lost time. Now, remember to keep the interaction going. So it's not just a matter of assessing constantly, but also the way you assess, the things you do. So the students are always interacting with you and with their classmates, in spite of the fact that they are not in the same room. Always give examples and use your gestures, your tone of voice to present. See, when we are in the classroom, we have a whole body that moves about the students, that mingles, that shows facial. When we teach online, all we have is our face and our hands. So bring your hands up to the camera and using your face and hands, create a representation of what you would do in a classroom with your whole body, with going up front, staying in the back, and doing things of that sort. Gestures, of course, are acting, okay? And we have always thought of teachers as actors. So one of the first things that does not let you be a good teacher of English is if you are shy. Shy people are not cut out to be good teachers of English because you need to be very extrovert, you need to be out there, you need to do things, you need to keep your students' attention on you. And of course, because within you and them, there is going to be a language flow, and that's what they are going to keep. Now, in order to keep these dependent learners, we have to maximize access to materials, see? Well, how do we have materials when we are teaching online? Well, it's not just the show and tell thing, it's also the kind of files that you send your students. So obviously you need to have a special email for online teaching, not your regular mail, because then you're going to be getting mail of all sorts and not unwanted mail all the time. So create an email account specifically for teaching and use that as a means of communicating, but especially a means for receiving things so that you can look at them, and a means for sending things out so that they can receive from you things that will keep them involved offline, person, paper, person, screen, without the pressure of being part of a class. And of course, with time constraints as we always have. Which brings me to the next point, because I was just talking about offline activities, okay? Well, offline tasks is a great way to engage students who don't always have mobile devices or internet access. Keep in mind that sometimes a home has limited access to the internet, and they have several children or several students and even the grown-ups that go to college. And there is this struggle and fight, not just for the internet, but also for the device itself. So don't think of your presentation in front of these kids or teenagers as being the main thing that's going to happen in your class. Think of it as a time that you have to talk to people about what's happening overall, especially what you are expecting from them offline, okay? Now, of course, we always want them to produce something. When we are in regular class sessions, students bring their homework to the real world. They practice, obviously, self-directed learning. But when we are teaching online, this self-directed learning becomes crucial because you want them, as they are at home, to understand what needs to be done. There's no moment of, teacher, how did you say, or how am I? You're not there, okay? So one of the things that I've noticed that has worked for me is I create tutorial videos, okay? And whenever I assign my students something, I always add a link that they can click on. And what happens is if they click on it, is that they get a further explanation of how this task is supposed to be carried out. Now, you might think that it's a lot of work. Yes and no. It's only a lot of work if you never keep track of these little videos. But if you keep track of them, you can keep using them forever. Okay, just label them in a way that you, like a file that you know exactly what each of those little files is for, what each video is for. Now, when you plan, always ask, before you actually do something with your students, run a little litmus test, a little creativity test. Ask yourselves, if this is what I'm going to do with my students today or tomorrow or next week, whatever, am I calling for enough creativity to be applied? If you are not sure of that, then reorganize your lesson. It means that it's flat, and we don't want flat, because then students, if their brain is not busy, you lose them. Many children are disciplined and they sit in front of the computer and they sit there until the session is over. Does this mean that they are understanding? No. You want to set it in a way that they are being creative. There is no way of being creative if you are not involved. And today's topic is involvement. So anytime a student is being creative, it is proof that they are involved. Now, there are two broad categories of activities to keep in mind when you want to keep our learners involved with online classes. So let's take a look at these categories. And I sort of mentioned them earlier. One thing is when the students are in front of their screens participating in class. That's with you. How can I keep them involved when they're looking at me like right now online? But there's also the category of post-lesson. Okay? When the session is over, but not the lesson per se. See? So don't think of your lesson as an hour or a class. Think of a lesson that uses time online, but it can start before and it can end after. Or it can start with the online to set up everything, and then students will work, they will produce, they will send. So if there's a difference between a class online and a lesson, which includes a class or time with you online. Let's take a look at that. How do we present a concept when we are teaching online? Well, the best way to present the concept is by showing examples and describing them. I'm going to use an example of one of my books to analyze how this is supposed to be done. There's a new lesson, we want to present a new concept. So how do I go about that? Well, so in order for us to understand the activities, I need all of us to be familiar with the story. So please indulge me by following me on your screens as I present you the story. This is a reading section, and I prepare strips for students from levels 1 through 4, 6-year-olds to 10-year-olds, give and take. And because I am following objectives, so that the global scale of English has objectives, then I will read a story about the weather and clothes. That gives the student a direction line. It gives them a way of keeping track of what's important here. Okay. And I have 6, as you can see, I have 6 illustrations. The first one says, Amy is happy. Today her class is going on a hike. I'm ready for my hike. I have my hiking boots, water, and snacks. Wait a minute. You need your raincoat and umbrella. Why? What's the weather like? Is it rainy? Number 2, Mom doesn't think Amy is ready. You see, you could either do the caption first and then the dialogue, or the other way around, as long as you change the tone. So it looks like an introduction if you do it first, or it looks like a concluding statement if you do it last. Number 3, let's do the concluding statement model. No, not now, but what was the weather like yesterday? It was raining. Concluding. Mom doesn't want Amy to get wet. Now let's do the other one, opening. She doesn't want Amy to get cold. And last night it was cold and windy. Take your sweater and your hat and gloves too. Okay. But Mom, it's warm and sunny today. Sunny? Oh, then take your sunglasses and sunscreen too. Amy isn't worried about the weather. Now you're ready. Amy is ready for all kinds of weather. Of course, we don't want to go out there. Now, what I just did here is I introduced the concept. I am involving my students in the new concept. But I need to get feedback from them. I need to know if they understood or not. Otherwise, remember what I said earlier about make sure that meaning is clear. So then the second category of activities are activities for monitoring, to check to see if they did understand. So number 6 says, look at the story and answer the question of a partner. What's Amy's class doing today? What was the weather like yesterday? What was the weather like last night? What was the weather like today? What's Amy wearing at the end of the story? If students can respond to that, I can feel okay. This means that they understood the conversation, the comic strip, the meaning of it. If they can't, then I need to do something that is called assisting. And in the teacher's guide, of course, I include activities to close that gap. And then finally, I challenge my students. Think big. Do you think it's a good idea for Amy to take so many clothes? And the kids are going to split. Some of them will say, no, it's supposed to be fun. Who's going to want to carry all these things? And some will say, yes, because prevention is the mother of success. Whatever, yeah. I just invented that right now. So what clothes would you take? And then, of course, that's where it really starts, because students start asking questions. Teacher, how do you say? And that is when the students are actually producing. Now that we are familiar with the story, let's get deep into the strategies that I want to recommend. While the student, remember that I had 2 levels, like when I'm teaching online and then when they're working on their own? Well, let's take look at the first one, when the students are sitting in front of the screens participating in class. And I'm going to present my strategies, giving you 4 pieces of information. First of all, the concept. Like, what is it that I'm involving the students with? Then what the teacher does, how the students show their involvement, and how the teacher assesses if it happened or not, if the result was okay or not. I hope I explained myself, because we don't have that much time. So here we go. Now, remember I talked about involve, monitor, assist, and then the final thing, challenge? Well, we're going to visit those 4 teaching stages, because those are the teaching stages of assessment for learning. Remember I talked about a difference between assessment for learning versus assessment of learning? The latter being like testing, but knowing how well they did. But the former, assessment for learning, is a method, not a what, but a how. And the how has these 4 teaching stages. So I'm going to show you 2 activities for each of those 4 stages. 2 involves, 2 monitors, and you get the idea. So if I'm involving my students in the story, the student must follow the presentation of the story. So this means that I'm looking at them online and I want them to be following. I want them to be looking at their books. I want them to be looking at the screen, whatever it is, whatever means I'm using, whatever media I'm using, in order to cover the basics, which are to understand its meaning. You see, first things first, understand. Now, what does the teacher say to make that happen? Well, let's give the teacher the microphone. Just a little icon for us to remember what we're doing. Here's the teacher in front of the camera, just like I am right now. This story is about weather and clothes. As we can see, Amy is talking to her mother. We are going to role play. I want you to decide if you want to be Amy or her mom. And then I'm looking at the students and I say, okay, show me Amy's. And hopefully half the group will go, hey. Show me moms. And of course, some of the boys are going to say, hey, I'm not Amy or mom. So that's where the teacher's strategy comes in. And we can tell them, no, but acting is different. See, a good actor can be any character. So show me Amy's until you get half and half, okay? It doesn't really matter if it's half and half, but everybody should be one of the 2. Now, how are the students going to get involved? Well, let's put a little line, a little rectangle, purple I might add, around what the student is going to, how the student is going to show involvement. A student is going to raise a hand when he or she here's Amy, if that's where they want to play, or a mom, depending on the chosen role. Now, you might think, oh, what is this? Well, I'm basically showing you a transcript of the class. Okay? What the teacher says and what you are going to be looking at the screen finding. See, if there's hand raising going on, you're good. Because what is the other option? That you say, show me Amy's, show me Mom's, and the kids go, then you have a problem. Okay? And then what you need to do is assist them in a different way. And that's one of the reasons why I write assisting techniques for every single lesson I write, is because of that, because it can happen. Okay? It's known to happen. Now, so okay, they do it, but how do I assess it? Okay, well, eyes on screen, this is you're assessing, making sure everybody raised their hand once. You see, this is the flow we're going to do. This is for involving the students. Involving is when we present. In other words, when we present the new language, it's considered an involving activity. Okay? And that's today's topic. Now, another involved activity. I promised you 2 of each category. Full body involvement. Oh, the other one was just to see if you wanted to be Mom or Amy. But now I want everybody, and I want their full body involved, because they are going to be doing role playing. They're going to act out the conversation. So that's what I want to do, but I haven't told the students anything. How do I go about telling them? Well, give me the microphone. Okay? You can also act out your role. So don't be shy and be who you chose to be. Okay? Amy or the mom. Okay? And so that's what I said. I keep my fingers crossed. What do I expect to see to know that the flow is happening, that the class is progressing? Well, and if you can do that, then what the students are going to show you is they are involved. Okay? Teachers can ask students to permanently have, one of the things that I do with my students is I give them a little headband. Okay, where they can stick different post-its. They use the same headband the whole school year. Okay, if today they're going to be Amy or Mom, they on post-its they can write with a felt pen. They can write Mom, or they can write Amy, and by doing so, they will be showing me the role they're playing and my expectations of where to look depending on where the conversation is going. Obviously, I have to assess. So what is involving? Now let's move on to the second category, which is monitoring, okay? Now, the difference between involving and monitoring is that when we monitor, we are there to collect. We are there to see if it happened, if learning. In the classroom, this is when the teacher walks around the students, mingles, listens in, but that can happen online. Well, we have to make it happen in a way. When you monitor, you want to show understanding, but because it's online, you want to make this understanding be shown physically, visually, okay? And for that, I use little cards. So for instance, if the teacher says, look at the questions in activity 6, the ones I read earlier, show me your number card. And this means that I tell my students always have like a pack. They have color cards, the red and the green for yes and no, the numbers 1 through 10, depending on what number they are. So you find a way of giving them resources. So if I ask the questions and show me your number card according to the question I read. So some of you might say, what is the benefit of having the students show a number that follows a question group or a question list, just to keep them on the edge of their seats? See, if they don't, I can start reading the questions at random, and if my students are paying attention, in other words, if they are involved, okay, which is today's topic, let's not forget that, then they will know which one I just read, and they will show number 3 or 5 or 6. Okay? And that is another little trick of making sure that the students are on the edge of their seats, involved the whole class. Now, they will show the number cards, and the way the teacher will assess, is going to be by looking at the screen and make sure that everybody's showing the right number. Now, another monitoring, I told you I was going to give you 2 for each. Monitoring, another category, another activity for the same category for monitoring is when you want the students to show knowledge of the information by pointing at it where it's written. See? The teacher can say something like this. I'm going to ask you 5 questions and point, and I'll ask you to point at the correct answer in the speech bubbles. Okay, so I can ask a question, but because the answer to the question is written in those speech bubbles, then I'm not just going to have them say it. I want to see it. I want them to say, oh, she's wearing an umbrella, and you know, show me. Because it is geographically divided or distributed rather, then it's easier to know if all the hands are going to the same corner, so that if 2 are not, you can immediately tell. This is something, I forget the name that psychologists use for this, but it means that when there is one thing that is different, it points out to you, it jumps out to you. And that is a wonderful feature of a human brain, because then that can help you assess fast. Now, what the students will do, of course, is raise the book to the camera and point to the text wherever the right answer is. But see, if I'm pointing at this finger, if you have 20 students and 18 are pointing at this finger, but you have 2 pointing this one, you will immediately notice the difference. See? It's visual discrimination of the lack of continuity, which makes your brain, it's like when you show a lot of reds and then one blue, you can immediately go to the blue one and know who it is. Okay? Now, of course, a way of assessing is that you can skim and scan. This is exactly what I was saying. You go like, it doesn't take you time. Because remember, one of the problems we have when we teach online is time. Okay. Time, just like the one I have right now. Now we're going to move on to the 3rd category, and this is assisting. What we want is for students to confirm knowledge of meaning in a physical, playful way. Notice that I add the word playful, not only physical, but physical that is playful, physical that is fun. Now, in order to do that, then the teacher can ask, everybody stand up in front of your camera. I'm going to play the audio for the story, and I want you to follow along, miming what you hear. So as the audio carries on saying what I read for you earlier, the students are supposed to respond, umbrella. You know, so they're following, they're showing understanding, and at the same time, they're having fun. And then that's what the students do. They stand up in front of the camera, listens to the audio, and reacts miming. There is no speaking here. It's just a reaction. It's just a miming activity following what you or they are reading. In this case, what they're listening to. And the teacher will check that there are no noises, just the miming going on, and that miming matches the audio played. And again, you can tell the difference immediately if someone or some students are not doing the same thing at the same time. Now, another category is challenge. Okay. So how do we challenge our students? Well, what we want to do, as I just did the assisting part, what we want to do for challenging, I feel like something did not, let me see what happened here. Did I do monitoring, understand? Yeah, the body cards. Yeah, we did that. Somehow I feel that I pressed this excessively. We did the pointing, the speech bubbles. Yeah, we're good. And of course, so we did 2 monitorings, and then we did assisting for physical, playful way. And then we have another one, and now we're moving into challenging. Now, challenge is the 4th category of assessment for learning. Currently, because of research, we have added a 5th category, but it's not really a new category. It's really a repeat of the first one, but now for a different reason. So I will tell you a little bit about that, because this is the most recent experimentation that I've done. But before I do that, I want to wrap up the 4 stages that have been conventionally part of assessment for learning. Where are we in the teaching process at this point? We have done in a very physical, visual, involving way, the presentation of the topic through involving activities. We have done the give me feedback to see if you understood part of the teaching through physical, fun activities by getting from them or by monitoring our students. Then we moved on to assisting. Why do we need to assist students? Because between the involving and the monitoring, it's not going to happen perfectly. Some students are going to show that not everything was understood or learned. So this gap, this difference between what they were supposed to learn and what they actually learned, there's a gap there. Well, in current methodology, we are supposed to develop activities to close that gap. And that's what the assisting activities are. So now that we're done closing the gap, then we are ready for a challenge. It means that the students are at a level of learning that they know, they understand, they're ready to move on. Now, one of the contributions of assessment for learning as a method is that it has allowed us to go a little bit further than where we were. And that little further movement is challenges. Now that all is settled, that everybody understood everything, we are ready to have the students use the new language in a challenging way. Obviously, it doesn't go without, well, it shouldn't go without saying, because I'm actually going to say it. This challenge has to be attainable. It can't be just something totally out of the park, because then students are not going to feel motivated. So these are going to be attainable challenges, but yet challenges. So the first challenge that I have for my students here is that they must show alertness, paying close attention for a fast response. This means that it's not just based on remembering. Here, especially those of you that are new teachers that don't have that much experience, think of the difference between showing me that the student can say something versus showing me that they can use it in a way that goes beyond remembering how to say it. Here, for instance, speed is going to be important. And this is what I would tell my students. We are going to play a game. Let's see if your speakers are working fine. You know, computer speakers. I'm going to say someone's name. And that person will say the text. In other words, read. See, let's start. Mary. And when Mary hears her name, then Mary starts reading. See, Mary starts saying, I'm going for a hike. I have, and the moment Mary has shown me that she knows where to start, which means that she knows what's going on, that she is involved, then I yell, George. And George carries on exactly from where Mary is now. What does this mean? That the students are going to be on their tips because I have my hiking boots, which is exactly what comes with I have the last words that Mary said. You see what I'm trying to say here? It's a way of, let's say that you say Marcos, and Marcos has no idea. What does Marcos show me? That he cannot deal with a challenge. The challenge is to step on it exactly where, to keep concentrated on things. And what the teacher does is the teacher sees that everyone is prompt and prepared to intervene when called upon. This means that we can go back to the same student that we had a minute ago, so nobody rests in their laurels thinking that I already participated, so it's not going to happen to me again. A good move would be to go back to them by surprise. Now, another example of a challenge in a different kind would be it's not just to be on the edge of your chair knowing when they're going to call your name again, but this is for social opinion or for social discussion. You want your students' ideas to come up, and of course, the way you're going to convey this to them is that their ideas are worth counting. Okay. So what I would say in this case, and remember, these are challenges, okay? Why do you think Amy's mother is so protective? You know, sweater and sunscreen at the same time. So the students are going to say all kinds of things. Many times they will need help, and that's good because they need vocabulary. And someone needs from you, that is the best way of having their attention. And that happens in life as well, as you well know. What clothes should she take? And they start asking for names that they don't know. And of course, some they do, so they start putting things together. Students discuss and evaluate their opinions. They agree, they disagree, and these agreements and disagreements become conversations. And why are we teaching them English? So they can be part and take part of conversations, you see? Now, what the teacher's assessment will do is that they will have a chance to express their opinion to the group. And that includes, of course, a subtopic. What are subtopics? Well, subtopics are things that derive from the topic. The topic here is the weather. Amy, her mother, out. But a subtopic could be anything weather related. So it's a connection. And so that becomes the subtopic of the content. And those subtopics can be dealt with as extra activities, independent activities that you can address by having the students do them on their own. So that's what's next when the session is over, but not the lesson per se. So, and then the concept would be, for instance, you could send them or have somewhere where they can download PowerPoint presentations. And when I say PowerPoint, is not a theory. The PowerPoint can include audio. The PowerPoint can include pictures. So it's basically an extension of your class, but the student will have it there. And which means a good thing because they can control it. They can watch it as many times as they want. Now, how do I get these PPTs, these videos, these self-made videos these tutorials that I do for my students or extensions of the topic? Well, if it's something you want to send them to look at online, well, you give them the YouTube extension, what have you. But mostly when we teach children, we want to be very careful with that. We don't want just to send them out there, okay? So one of the things I do is I am subscribed to a service that allows me to send heavy files. But I don't send them to my students. I send them to myself. Here's the tip. See, I use a company named Hightail. I think it's hightail.com, but there are many companies out there. And so what I do is I develop a little video or an extension or notes or comments or something. And then what I do is that this video I send it to myself, but the service will produce a link that I have because I sent it to myself. So then when I send my students their activities, I give them that link. So everybody can just click on it from their computers, and then they will be able to connect to their service, and they will be able to watch the video that I want them to watch as an extension. So what the teacher does is the teacher instructs students and says, watch the extension video, so and so, okay? And then of course the student is going to get involved by getting these worksheets. If I want to send a worksheet, I do the same thing. I send it to myself, I send them the link. And as they get their activities, what they see is a series of links that they keep clicking on. And it's also me, or it's something else that I want them to do. And of course, the students will share the file and they can respond back to me by sending me a picture of the answered worksheet. So the students do the worksheet, they take a picture, they send it to me. Now, they don't always have to send it to me. They can send it to their team leaders, and that team leader can concentrate things and address me with it. Now, another thing I can do is that I have remember I was talking about classroom topic related extensions? like extra topics. Like if it's the weather, maybe I want them to know about the weather service or, that kind of thing. So then the teacher will say something like this: summarize what you learned today. I tell my students, search places with bad weather and take notes about them. So the students go online and say, bad weather, okay? And of course, they register their data, they file worksheets, and they share the file with the teacher. As I said earlier, through different means. They can send it to you as an attachment. They can send you a picture. Always remember that there is a limit of the amount of megabytes that students can send, and they don't need to have a file sharing service like the one I have, because that costs money. So then you want to make sure that you facilitate their sharing through direct emails. And in the end, the teacher views the work, and that's what we want. Now, then comes the more, I'm not going to say moderate, but let's say the more reflective part of the extra. And I call this reflections or feedback. So the teacher can say something like this: what doubts do you have about today's class? This is a contact with students, of their reaction, of how they feel, of like, is this working for them? Okay. What was the thing you liked the most? So the students can share. They think about the class and goes over it mentally, which means that he or she is connected, okay? And they can register their answers. And at the end, the teacher starts the next class asking about this to receive feedback or addressing the questions that students sent him or her as an introduction to the next lesson, addressing closing gaps. So you see, this is another dimension of monitoring, because you monitor your students' reaction to what's happening, and then the first minutes tomorrow, you address questions that you got, you clarify doubt that you got. But there has to be this constant communication that you could do by this special account online that you should have. Now, you can have your students keep logs, register things. So register the words you learned today, I tell them. So the students go back to their lesson, to their page, to their book page, and anything that is new to them, any new vocabulary, they keep a log in the vocabulary. So I tell them, register the words you learned today, make vocabulary cards. Now, not only a log, but I make these little cards because during like moments in the teaching process, I want them to manipulate the card. They have to be independent, so you can play games with them. They can put them upside down and do all kinds of things. If it's only a list on a notebook, it is less flexible. There are less uses for that. So word cards is wonderful. The student adds new and other words of interest to a vocabulary log. And what you do is you add vocabulary cards to the school year collection. So as the school year progresses, the vocabulary of the year keeps growing, which is great because then you can summarize things. Then you can have like a day where you're just going to go and play with the vocabulary cards and have, mix it a little bit. And then, of course, we have the teacher assessment, which is you ask your students for their files, okay, for their collections of things, and you can review or just view or revise, which would be a more extreme thing to do, but fair enough. You are the teacher and you want to know how they're doing. Now, there is the personal expression, the out-of-class projects, the things that are could be assigned individually or in group. So I can tell my students, how can you use the information you learned today? Did anything have a special meaning to you? And the students will draw about today's content, maybe a very bad weather day they had recently. They share it goes into the system of sharing, of sending and receiving. You can also, it depends on your school, you can also have a website where the students can post things. Or maybe there is a Facebook page for the classroom, for the class. So there are all these ways of students being able to upload things that they are responding to based on what they're doing in the classroom. And the teacher can periodically ask for files for viewing. Or you can use pin boards. I've noticed that that's a good strategy. You can use pin boards and other ways of exhibiting things so you can have a class, because these are something you can send to the parents too. Don't forget that we're selling our classes as well. You know, you're selling the concept of good work. So class culture, community students in school, all these connections with the extra classroom activities. The teacher can say something like this. This afternoon, check your class and list 3 garments that you have that you could wear in the winter and 3 you could wear in the summer. Then send your list to your teammates, teamwork, right? Before 6 p.m. Please remember, if this is the week, you have to summarize everybody's work and send it to me before bedtime. So there is teamwork, there are learning strategies involved, and at the same time, there is the connection of the topic, weather, with the student's closet, which means involvement. At home, the student checks the closet and lists garments, forwards list to the week's leader, and then of course the leader consolidates lists and things and sends them to the teacher. What is the teacher's role? The teacher evaluates the level of socialization. You're not even concerned about the garments at this point. Or, I mean, I'm using this example, but this could be done with any topic you're teaching. What you want to do is see if the list arrives in time, if everybody is participating or a lot of people are staying behind. What you are checking is the level of socialization that your students have, regardless of the fact that they are learning online. Now, finally, and I know I'm stepping on some time here, the parents can be your greatest ally if they understand what's happening. So connect with them early and often. Have them understand what's going on in the classroom. Okay? And so that you can find out what kind of resources students will have available to them, and you can target your teaching based on what they can do. And of course, it's better to over-communicate, as I said here, than to under-communicate. Like everybody else, parents are overwhelmed. They keep jobs, they're concerned about the economy, they're concerned about many other issues, not just their sons or daughters' school. So parents sometimes protest, sometimes they complain because it's a little nervous tick. Way down, they feel ill-equipped. They don't feel prepared. They don't feel ready to be their kid's advisor when it comes to learning online. Most of them cannot do it. So then stay in touch with them. Have them be your friends. Make it clear that you're available to support them in any way you can. And of course, that will make them very likely to participate in their child's learning. So my friends, you turn it into a win-win situation. Learning happens, parents are happy, and everybody is happy. So now the class is over. Well, my friends, thank you so much. There's my email, mario.herrera@pearson.com. Send me an email whenever you have time with any questions you might have. And if you want to join me on Twitter, I'm active on Twitter @MarioELT. So I hope I see you there as well. For the time being, thank you very much. Have a nice time in Venezuela, in whatever city you are. And again, greetings from Houston, Texas. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.
Gracias por todo, Mario. Excelente.
Gracias. Nos vemos.
Estamos hablando.
Claro que sí.
No sé
Gracias,
si Mario,
Mario.
si Mario tenga chance de responder alguna pregunta de los asistentes. Mario, si hay alguien que quisiera hacer una pregunta.
Aquí estoy si hay alguna pregunta, pero los tenemos muteados, así que no creo.
Claro, pero ellos pueden abrir su micrófono. Melvi, ¿cierto?
Todo estuvo maravilloso, Mario. Thank you very much. Very much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you. Nice seeing you, Luis.
All right.
Bueno, creo que no hay preguntas. La verdad es que estuvo maravilloso. Muchísimas gracias, Mario. Muchísimas gracias y ojalá tengamos el placer de tenerte prontamente en Venezuela.
Ojalá. Dios quiere las cosas se presten para ello. Gracias a
Claro
todos.
que sí. Gracias a ti, feliz tarde. Y muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes por acompañarnos en la tarde de hoy. Les recuerdo que esta es una serie de actividades especiales que está realizando OCERCO en el marco de su 25 aniversario. Los invitamos a revisar nuestra página web, nuestras redes sociales, donde también van a ver unas ofertas especiales en los productos que distribuimos a nivel nacional para que puedan allí escoger el que más se adapte a sus necesidades. Así es que muchísimas gracias a todos. Nuevamente les pedimos excusas por el inconveniente que supimos solventar, pero son temas que pasan en el mundo virtual. Así es que feliz tarde para todos y muchísimas gracias.